Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Viz. Today I have a very special guest, Jane, who is here to talk about her very interesting Viz of the day, critical hits. So over to you, Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane. I recently became an academic ambassador, so I'm excited to see where that'll take me. And before that, I kind of came to fame because I won IronViz Student Edition this past year, and I got to go to Tableau conference, so that was really exciting.
Sounds really good. How do you find the experience watching IronViz in real life?
Yeah, so it was really interesting since the IronViz Student Edition winners were speaking at the very end of the competition. We attended all of the rehearsals for IronViz. We got to see the contestants practicing, making their vises. And there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that the actual event runs smoothly. It's really cool to be able to experience that and see all the hard work that the IronViz contestants put into it.
That sounds really exciting. I wish I could be in the room to see that as well, because building everything in 20 minutes on stage, that takes a lot of practice just to get into that.
Oh, yeah. And when you were watching them practice in the room, it was captivating almost to see this really intense situation, seeing them make their vises so fast.
Sounds good. All right, so let's jump into your Viz.
Yeah, let me bring it up. So I saw this data set on video games and I wasn't really sure where to start. I was looking through what's there, and as someone who really likes to make sure I am like maximizing my purchases, I always look at user reviews whenever I buy something. So my first thought was to look at the meta scores and the user scores to try to see like which games are good or not. And when I was doing that, I noticed that some games have a really big difference between Metascore and the user score. And there's also this certification metric from the Metacritic organization, these games that are certified as must-play games. And it was interesting that these games that are certified with that also have a large difference sometimes between the meta score and the user score. I thought that would be something interesting to highlight. So I decided I wanted to focus on that in this viz, and I just kind of went with it from there. I wanted this page to be similar to a retro arcade game. They usually have a start page, and I found this cool font that's like a rock Metallica kind of font. I was looking for something cool, so I made this title and made this particular chart first and to put it on the start page. And then from the start, we have this ratings page. The main thing I wanted to focus on was the difference between the score. So I made this similar viz to what's on the start, where it has the difference. And then I also have these additional categories I created. I created my own category called Hidden Gems, which are games with a user score of 9 out of 10 or more and a minimum of 500 reviews from users. They have a minimum of 500 reviews because I know that with user reviews, it's susceptible to voluntary response bias. I thought it was interesting that some of these games critics didn't like, but users did. I also created this not worth the hype category where a lot of people made user reviews, but the Metascore is below 90%. So that means it is probably a popular game, but the users didn't like it, or maybe there's something controversial about it, and that's why it had low scores.
Seeing that you don't really play games and the context required for you to understand the data set is a lot. This is a very good analysis that you have done. I like the fact that you created your own categories like hidden gems and not worth the hype, because like you said, there are a couple of outliers, especially like for ESPN football or sports game, I would say. The critics seem to rate them really high in terms of like how well it simulates the real life action. But for the most parts, some of these sports games don't play as fluid as the users would like. So I think that's probably why you have such a huge disparity in the user scores versus the critic scores. To be completely honest with you, I think even within the video games industry, it's still a black box to us on how Metacritic assigns must play and their critic scores, because they don't release like a list of reviewers that do testing on the games. So it could be biased to a certain extent, and when we will never know because it's part of that proprietary algorithm, I would say.
Yeah, and I actually did talk to one of my friends who's a gamer, and I think he mentioned as well that the ratings from the critics aren't always that accurate to what users experience. So I think that also guided the direction I wanted to take with this, since I discovered this difference between what users are saying, what critics are saying, and then I got that confirmation from someone who knows more about this space that maybe I was on the right track with that. And then I guess after I was looking at the ratings, I decided to look at playtime, just because that was one of the parts of the data set that I hadn't really explored yet. I pulled it in and connected it to the ratings because I was looking at if the playtimes of games will change based on what the rating is. And it seemed that must plays and hidden gems have around the same kind of playtime, but not worth the hype games. They're quite a lot higher. So I think maybe the longer a game is, people become more disgruntled with it and they get annoyed. But I did look at your Viz of the Day about Final Fantasy, I believe, and I saw that you used basically a similar data set on the playtimes, but instead of doing the sum of hours, you did based on playing 2 hours of the game per day. And I wish I had taken that into account in this, because if they were playing a game for a straight 9 days, no sleeping, they would fully complete it. And then I realized it's probably not realistic, but I also was talking to my friend who plays games, and when a new game is released, he can spend like 12 hours a day on the weekend playing a game. So then I was like, I don't really know what the average a day would be at that point. So I kept it as is, but I thought that was interesting.
I mean, there's no hard and fast rule about this calculation. I basically did that because I was just reflecting on my own gaming hours. For the most parts, I do get like maybe an hour stick in if I sleep less. But like your friend, if there's a game that dropped and I really wanted to play the game, I'll come to some form of negotiation with my wife. She'll take the kids off and I'll have a good 7 to 8 hours of game time on that over the weekends. But yeah, it varies. You can't really take an average of somebody's gaming habits because like it's so diverse. Everyone plays games differently.
And finally, I made this Explorer tab. And this was actually, I was making this viz and I was talking to my sister about it, kind of bouncing ideas with her. And she inspired me to make this section. I wanted to make it really like an arcade game, like you found this bonus game. So it pulls the person into this congratulations screen. Then it goes into how to play. I did a lot of research into retro arcade games to try to make the feel very similar. I downloaded an emulator for like retro arcade games, and I was playing a few games to try to see how it was laid out, how they did their fonts, the color schemes, and everything. So I tried my best to make it very similar to how an actual game would be with this retro 8-bit theme. Then I have this opponent selection, which I think is cool. I can select a must-play game that meets one of these. So I kind of calculated those, and then we go to next. It uses a set to create this comparison between the two games. This is kind of an alternative to, I think I've seen it called like a barcode graph. So I have all of the other games here, and then it highlights the 2 games that are chosen by the user. And I just thought it kind of fit the 8-bit theme with the squares. The graphics here are also inspired by a arcade game that I was playing in this emulator. So I kept going with that, and I thought that was a cool feature. Fit the vibe.
Did you create all these assets in Illustrator, Photoshop, or Figma?
I actually created them in Google Drawings and PowerPoint. I think for what I was making, PowerPoint has all of the 3D effects that are pretty easy to do compared to Photoshop, where I think they look good.
They do look good. I have to comment on this because I think you coming in from a non-gamer perspective and doing so much research to the extent of downloading an emulator and playing through a couple of games just to understand their layout, their font, their typography, how they put images together and everything. It's really commendable, and I love this. The thematic design of this is really on point, and I think you've done it justice entirely.
Yeah, and this is also the first time I actually made a viz using sets. I hadn't really explored sets as much just because I didn't know a lot about them until more recently when I went to the analytics tug and they were talking about using sets.
I think sets are probably one of the most underused feature in Tableau because the easiest way of creating groups of data is just using either groups of parameters to switch between each of them. But sets are really powerful. And with all the AI features that Tableau is building down the line, a lot of it depends on sets because the AI can create different sets and do cross-reference, intersect, interjoins, and stuff like that to get to the AI-driven solution. So I think everyone should try their hand to get better at sets. I know Andy Kriebel is trying to get a workshop together to teach people the difference between sets and parameters because he also noticed that sets are really underused. It's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, well, it's really a powerful tool, especially like in a case like this where I wanted to dynamically change what was in this data set. So that was definitely a good use case, I think.
Thank you, Jane, for spending time with us, talking through this amazing viz. I think this shows a lot on how you can actually do research on a topic that you might not have much experience in and still do justice to it, because just looking at the design of it and the analysis that you've done, it doesn't occur to me that you're a non-gamer. Hopefully everyone learned something new. This is great work, and we'll see everyone next week. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So this data source is actually part of something that the GamesNightViz team is working with the academic team. We created a number of different sources like Metacritic scores, Wikipedia, how long to beat, where you have the different average play times and stuff like that. And it's a way of us to give to the community a much accessible data set, because what we realize is every couple of months when we do a challenge, not everyone resonates with that particular challenge. For example, the last month we did on cooking with the spice of data. If you don't play games like Stardew Valley or Cooking Mama or Overcook, there isn't a very strong connection for you to create a viz out of it. And we do hope that with this dashboard that has, I think, 14 to 15,000 games over from 1980s to 2024, this would help people to just jump in at any point in time because everyone plays different games.
Yeah, I liked that there was like the descriptions on all of the dimensions, measures. I thought that they all made sense and really helped me to understand what was going on. I liked the data set as well. I think it includes a lot of what I would want of a comprehensive data set. It has a lot of data. You could have, 100 people looking at this data set and they could each make something different, which really speaks to the flexibility of this data set.
Yeah, those are interesting points. And I love the fact that you said something about 100 people can look at this dashboard and visualize them differently. And that's what we were trying to go for when we were building this dashboard, because we want to allow people the flexibility to explore and analyze from different angles.